Hello there guys, and welcome to another one of my reviews. Today, as you probably already saw, we're gonna talk about the brand new Skoda Enyaq Facelift, a car that basically ruptured a big chunk of the Tesla sales last year, depending on the market, but at the EU level, it was number 5 in the EV rankings in terms of sales, and in Germany it was number 2. And this year, as people started boycotting Elon Musk's company even more, Enyaq and his brother, or its brother, the L-Rock, might have a fighting chance for the number 1 spot. They are doing pretty good in sales charts this year. So today we're going to talk about the Enyaq, what changed, what stayed the same, what specs you can choose from, and of course we're going to take it for a spin on this beautiful mountain road. We're going to talk about the fuel consumption, or energy consumption better yet. That's something I just blurted out, and the range you should expect from such a car. So let's get cracking. What changed on this model? Well, not the length. It's still a 4.66 meter long car with a wheelbase of about 2.75 meters, which is pretty big, and it is still built on the MEB platform, as you would expect. This is the platform, the electric platform developed by Volkswagen for its electric cars. And I know the MEB platform got a lot of flack initially when it was launched, and of course there were some issues, especially on the infotainment side of things, but as time moved on, Volkswagen kept improving it, and right now I think this platform is quite impressive overall. But what changed on the Enyaq is basically the design and some of the packages you have on offer. In terms of design, most of them have happened up front, and it seems like Skoda is following the trends in the industry right now. We can obviously notice that we have a split headlight design with the DRLs over here up top and with the main headlamp over there at the bottom. On the Enyaq, it actually looks pretty good. I've seen other designs that don't really inspire me that much, for example the 7 Series, but on this car I think it actually looks good. The DRLs up top over here are normally a continuous band, but depending on the options you take, and if you go for the Sportline model or not, we have the Sportline option fitted on this car, they can be split like you see over here, and they also double as signal lights, right? So let me show you. They look pretty good in my book. Also, Skoda decided to replace its central grille that we've known on the older model and could be had in crystal and lit up at night with this design over here, which can also be lit up at night depending on the options you take. If you decide to go for the lit up version, it's a lot more elegant and less in your face compared to the previous generation. The front bumper is also more aggressive on the Sportline models, and another big change you might notice is the fact that we no longer have the Skoda badges on this car. We have the car's name written in bold letters. Now that's another trend I'm seeing in the industry right now. I'm not really convinced that I'm a fan of it, but you know, it is what it is. Now, in terms of wheels, you can choose from 19-inch to 21-inch wheels. We have the 20-inch wheels, which come as standard on Sportline models. And as you might have guessed already, this is the coupe version of the Enyaq. So it has a sloping roofline towards the back compared to the normal or the regular flavor Enyaq in the range. Now, the problem is, if you go for this version, you can only get the glass roof on the car, which doesn't open, doesn't have a protective textile finish, and could be quite a pain in the butt during hot summer days like we're experiencing right now. If you go for the normal if you go for the normal Enyaq version, you can get a regular glass roof, you know, with an opening hatch, with an opening sunroof, and a textile cover underneath to protect you during hot summer days. Because right now, even though out here there are about 21 degrees Celsius, I'm willing to bet that inside there are more than 40 degrees Celsius. So let's move around the back. Not a lot of changes done over there. The tail lamps have been slightly altered. They are using LED technology, as are the headlights, by the way, standard LED headlamps, and you can also get the matrix function for them. But we do have the name of the brand also written in big letters over there, and the Sportline logo as well. Now, what I should also mention is the fact that if you go for this coupe version, most likely you will have a slightly better range. I don't know if you're actually going to feel it, but this car has a better drag coefficient of just 0.225 compared to the regular Kodiaq of 0.245, if that's something you're interested in. Let's talk about the specs for a moment before we hop inside and then set off for a little road trip. So, what changed on the facelift? Well, compared to the just before it went out of production pre-facelift versions, not a lot, not even in terms of naming, but compared to the original versions, which were the 60 and the 80, some things changed, at least in terms of naming. You're gonna have to excuse the cows behind me. They're a bit naughty today. So, what are we talking about exactly? Well, you have the Enyaq 60 and the Enyaq 85. The 85 can be had with a dual motor setup, but somehow Skoda doesn't communicate the exact figures each electric motor on each axle has. So the Enyaq 60 has 204 horsepower. It has a sole electric motor on the rear axle, as you would expect from the MEB platform, and it has a 59 kilowatt hour battery. The 85 version has a 77 kilowatt hour battery, 82 usable, that's why the 85, well, close, and 286 horsepower, and that's the same figure for the all-wheel drive version. So Skoda doesn't really tell us how the power is split between them, but we do know that on the X version we have more torque, which is 656. So it still remains an unknown as to how much power the front axle actually has. The batteries are NMC, they don't use LFP technology, 400 volts, and let's talk about charging. For the small battery version, 165 DC. As for the big battery, you can charge it at 175 DC, 11 kilowatt AC on both versions. Top speed, 160 kilometers an hour for the base version, 180 kilometers an hour for the 85 version. As for the energy consumption, well, we're going to talk about that later on. Now, another thing I want to mention, because it's quite important, is the fact that you can get adaptive dampers on these cars, the DCC dampers. Now, as far as I remember from the last Enyaq I drove, they made a huge difference in terms of comfort and sportiness. The same goes for this car. We don't have the DCC dampers on this model, and I kind of miss them because I remember the Enyaq as being incredibly comfortable, but we don't have it on this one, so it is what it is. Skoda models are actually very well known for their practical character, so let's talk about that on the new Enyaq Coupe. Compared to the regular flavor version, the coupe model loses about 15 liters of boot space. So that means you won't be able to, I don't know, put in 5 bottles of water extra in this car. But you still have a very practical boot, right? We have plenty of anchor points, one over here, one over here. We have separated spaces for all your, I don't know, pennies and change, right? Over here as well. They are very configurable. More anchor points over here. We have that extra feature as well. This one allows you to separate any area of the floor, right, to store some things. And we have some more space over here for a tire kit, and plenty of charging cables, and a ski hatch over there, and an additional hook over here. So you won't have any issues in terms of practicality with this car. Let's hop inside and check out what it has to offer. We do have these blinds over here because we are talking about a well-equipped model, but not all Enyaqs come with this. This is not exactly quality plastic, if you ask me. It's rather rough to the touch, and it could have been better, that's for sure. We do have synthetic leather over here and a trim that resembles carbon over here. I would have preferred some better quality plastic over here, not necessarily on the bottom, but this is where you will actually make contact with the car, and this is very unfriendly. Now, as for the material used inside, since we are talking about the Sportline model, this is a combination of Alcantara or microfiber and synthetic leather. You can also have it in the base versions. It only comes with a textile finish, and if you want the lounge option, it brings leather, natural leather, to the car's configuration. This is the amount of room you get in the back. Plenty of room for people of all sizes, including in terms of headroom. And we have a separate climate control button over here because we are talking about a tri-zone climate control, which comes as standard. We have heated seats in the back and a flat floor overall. And this is how the dashboard is shaping up in the facelifted Enyaq. Not a lot has changed on this car, but we're going to talk about it when we hop in the front, where we're going to talk about the materials used as well. So let's open up the door. Softer touch plastic indeed over here, but the same rough plastic over here. Plenty of storage room, right? We do have some synthetic leather over here to attenuate your elbows, and the Canton audio system, which is not exactly great. I do like these seats though. These come as standard on the Sportline model. They do hold you in place really nicely, and this one actually has memories and adjustable. It's electrically adjustable in a number of ways. It even has massaging function. It doesn't have ventilation though, but it's still a lot better than that one, which apparently for Skoda passengers don't really matter, because that one is actually not even electrically adjustable, right? So it has manual controls. On a car this expensive, I don't think that's okay. So this is the steering wheel. We do have the Skoda name over here, unfortunately, no longer the badge, right? But the steering wheel is the only one wrapped in real leather, and we do have the Sportline inscription over here. The center console is quite interesting. Plenty of storage space under it and over it. We have adjustable cup holders over here. You can move this to make more or less room. A wireless charging pad, a storage space over here, the gear shift lever, storage space, and for your coins. And we do have a rather clever armrest over here, which can accommodate a lot of stuff. Right, I do like the fact that we have physical buttons over here under the air vents for various shortcuts, and this is the infotainment screen. 13 inches comes as standard. The driver screen, the infotainment, the instrument cluster is 5 inches, and I think they've made great strides in terms of fluidity for their infotainment systems. I think it works great now. We do have Android Auto wirelessly on the full screen. For the Enyaq, and I still remember when I first drove the Enyaq that the 13-inch screen felt a bit big, but now that I've seen bigger ones, I think it's quite okay. We have some shortcuts over here. You can go into the apps menu, right? Plenty of options. Nothing really interesting to talk about. I do like the fact that we have synthetic leather over here, and then there's some plastic right here, which is soft to the touch. That's pretty good. But under this trim over here, where we have ambient lights, the materials do drop in quality quite drastically. So yeah, that's about it. Since we started reviewing this car outside the city limits, let's talk about the way it handles some highway driving. So what you saw earlier was shot on the top of a mountain on a road called the Transbucegi, which is absolutely brilliant in the Carpathian Mountains in Southeast Europe. And what I liked the most about the fact that I filmed over there was the downhill section, because that's where the Skoda Enyaq showed me just how good it is at recuperating energy. So On the downhill, the car managed to recuperate about 4% of the battery. When I started off, the battery state of charge was at 30%, with an estimated range of about 110 kilometers. But that was based on the uphill energy consumption, which was in total about 22.5 kilowatt hours. Then, when I started going downhill, at the bottom of the hill, in a little town called Sinaia, I had 34% of the battery left and an estimated range of about 150 to 160 kilometers. Then I hopped on a series of B roads, and up until I came to this highway, the car showed me an energy consumption from the top of the hill up until I actually entered the highway of 2 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers covered. And that's because the whole road was basically almost downhill. So yeah, quite impressive in terms of energy efficiency. And the average energy consumption on the long term, so Bucharest, Transbucegi, and then back up until I got back on the highway, dropped to 14.9 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers covered. However, in my usual test cycle, the B-road energy consumption should be around 12.5 kilowatts per 100 kilometers covered. So you should expect, if you're not driving on the highway but outside the city limits, you should expect an average of between 12 and 15 kilowatts per 100 kilometers covered, which should give you a range between 600 and 500 kilometers with a full charge. I think that should be pretty much enough for most people. Unless you're a truck driver doing 1,000 kilometers a day, I think that should be enough for longer trips as well. Now we are on the highway, and the first thing I want to talk about is the suspension. Now this suspension does its job pretty good, but that will depend on the road you're in. Now, as I mentioned, this car doesn't have the optional DCC adaptive dampers, so that means you will feel the bumps in the road and the potholes a bit harsher than on a DCC model. The last Enyaq I drove had this option ticked, and it was absolutely brilliant in terms of comfort. This one is comfortable, don't get me wrong, but it's not as refined as one with the DCC ticked. It's also not as quiet under the belly, right? The suspension is not as quiet as it would be with the DCC setup. So in my book, that's a must if you want to buy this car. What's not a must is the heat pump, which is not included. It's 1,000 euros extra, and I think you should think twice before purchasing it, because it won't make such a big difference during winter time. It will depend on the country you're in, of course. If you're in a warm country like Spain, definitely it's not worth it. If you're in the south of Italy, the same, right? So it will depend on where you live. If you live in Norway, that should be something you get as standard, but then markets usually have different kits available for the cars, right? And pricing as well. Other than that, on the highway, you will most likely use the travel assist system, which is basically adaptive cruise control with lane keeping assist. So the car will keep you on the lane, will keep the distance from the car in front of you, and if you wanted to, can automatically adopt the speed limit of the road you are driving on, right? So the car has a camera over here that reads the road signs, and whenever the speed limit changes, it can adapt. Now that works flawlessly in some countries. Over here in Romania, it doesn't, because simply put, the road signs are a mess, so they are often left out even though temporary work has been completed in some places, and so on and so forth. So I usually turn that off. Also, you can turn off the speed limit warning easily. You can set a shortcut over here, and you can absolutely change it in a second. You also have a shortcut over here. Press on this button, go here, and turn off speed limit response, right? And speed limit warning. So yeah, it's gonna be pretty easy to do. So on longer trips, I think this car is quite okay. The fast charging times, 175, should be good for about 20 minutes at a fast charging station. I didn't get to charge this car. I was going to, but then I got a phone call, so I got to get home. What's interesting is the fact that I left with 70% state of charge. I did all this trip, and I'm going back, and I still have enough battery to get home. So that's pretty impressive. So range anxiety is not exactly something people should be afraid of anymore. Now let's talk about road noise. I used my decibel meter, and the car recorded an average of 78 decibels at 130 kilometers an hour, which is pretty good in my book. I think that's really refined. Overall, considering we have a glass roof, I think that's pretty much okay. And on the highway, you won't have any issues with overtakes or anything like that, especially if we're talking about the 85 version, which has a top speed of 180 kilometers an hour, and 286 horsepower will be enough for most people anyway. So now you will probably be very curious about the energy consumption I recorded with this car at highway speeds. So we're doing 130 kilometers an hour right now. And I've been driving on the highway for quite some time, and the average energy consumption recorded by the car so far is 17 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers covered, which is pretty good. I was expecting over 20, but so far at an average speed recorded by the car of 127 kilometers an hour, I'm seeing 17, which is pretty impressive. That means you should be able to cover about 450 kilometers with a full charge on the highway. Now let's say you drive between 10 and 80%, right? So that should be, you should take into account about 70% of the battery. That would give you about 300 kilometers of range on the highway, just going between 10 and 80%. And I think that should be enough for most people. But I'm not done with my real life range test. We're going to talk about the end result when we get back in the city, because we're going to have to talk about how this car behaves around town as well. So here we are back in the city. Let's talk about the way this car drives and how much energy it needs around town. So I did my usual range test with this car around town, 100 kilometers in all kinds of traffic, and the average energy consumption was 21.5 to 22. That is quite a lot more than I expected from this car. That's especially true since I tested the Enyaq a number of times previously, and the last time I tested it in Bucharest, which is one of the busiest cities in the world, not just in Europe, I had an average of 18.5 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers covered, which was pretty good back then. Now it's about 3 to 4 kilowatt hours extra, but yes, the traffic is getting worse and it is incredibly hot out, and that combined with this roof means your AC unit will have to work extra, so that will raise the energy consumption overall as well. So yeah, I wouldn't get this option. If it had like a protection of some sort, or if it would have opened like it does on the normal Enyaq, yes, but this, why do I need a glass roof? To turn the inside of my car into an oven? No, thank you. So yeah, that means with those numbers, you should get about 350 kilometers of range with a single charge, which is enough. I mean, really, you probably do 350 kilometers around town in a week, and charging it for 20 minutes in the weekend shouldn't be an issue. That's if you rely on public charging stations, but if you're relying on home stations, right, home charging stations, it shouldn't be an issue at all, because you can charge it at home, with a slow charger every night, and you'd be fine. You'd be good to go for the next day. So yeah, overall, it is a bit more than I expected, but I think that's okay. And around town is where you will notice the suspension and the lack of those adaptive dampers I was mentioning earlier. Because with this passive setup, you can actually feel, and around town is where you will meet most of the potholes, tram lines, bad roads. At least that's the case in Romania. We have the worst roads around town, the best roads outside. You know, the highways are in good condition, the B roads are in good condition, the inner city roads are pretty good, but that's where you will notice a number of different scenarios and surfaces you ride on. So this car actually behaved pretty nice, and that, as I said, this is where you will notice the how much the suspension works, right? Compared to the DCC version, on this passive setup, you will notice just how often the suspension works, how much it has to deal with, the bumps and everything, and even how noisy it is, because it's not as quiet as you would expect. Sometimes you hear some peculiar noises making it into the cabin. So my advice would be to get a DCC suspension. The last time I drove an Enyaq, I had this suspension ticked on, and it was a completely different experience. So it was a lot more refined overall. Don't get me wrong, this is not a bad suspension setup. It's just that the DCC one is a lot better, and I would totally go for it, right? Other than that, other criticisms include just how sharp the throttle response is. Now, I know most people want a sharp throttle response, but when it comes to electric cars, since they have instant torque, uh, most of the time you will have to be extra careful with your right foot. And that's true in every driving mode. I'm not talking about sport mode. I would have expected in sport mode to have the car, you know, with a very sharp throttle response, but that's true in normal mode, in eco mode as well. At least the brake pedal is well dosed. You know, you have a predictable throttle response, brake pedal response. You know, the blend between regenerative braking and mechanical braking is really well done. So yeah, overall the car is very easy to drive around town. All the driver's commands are easy to do. You know, the steering is very light, and what I like about the Enyaq is the fact that you can tell it's built on a dedicated electric platform, and that's because it's very easy to park. The turn radius is very good, very small, so it will be rather easy to navigate around town with it, to park the car. You do have a lot of info coming in through the screen thanks to the 360-degree cameras. But yes, they could use an upgrade, because I've been saying this for quite some time now. All cars on the MQB Evo platform and the MLB platform and the MEB platform are using older cameras. And since they increased the screen size, you can actually tell just how bad the resolution of those cameras is. And I'm seeing Chinese cars with better resolutions these days, like a lot of them, basically all of them. And I'm wondering what are the Europeans doing if they cannot keep up with a simple thing like that with a better camera on board. So yeah, that could use an upgrade. But other than that, you know what, it's a pretty good car overall. But my advice would be choose the correct options for your daily usage needs. You know, if you need a heat pump, go for it. Not everyone is going to need one. If you need DCC dampers, go for them. If you need a big battery, go for it. You know, there's a number of things you don't really have to have on a car in order to avoid a huge price tag at the end of the day. So what's the takeaway when talking about the Skoda Enyaq? Is it worth your money? Well, this model right next to me costs about 60,000 euros, but of course this is almost a fully loaded model. It's lacking the adaptive suspension and the leather interior, which is a matter of taste, of course. And this is the coupe, which is basically about 2,000 euros more than the normal version, if you will. So yeah, it's quite an expensive car, but you don't have to get all that way up in the spec sheet, right? So you can get it for a lot cheaper. The prices for the normal Enyaq with the 60 version start at around 42,000 euros, but that will depend on the market you're in. The coupe is about 2,500 euros more expensive depending on the market once again. So it will depend on your needs and on the money you want to spend on a car like this. For what it's worth, I think this is a very spacious car. I think it's it has been making a lot of progress lately compared to the previous generation, and I think it's worth your attention. Otherwise, this car was the 5th best-selling car in Europe last year in terms of EVs, and the 2nd best-selling in Germany. So there is something to it. And I think the Elrock will play a big part in Skoda's electrifying efforts in the future. And we're going to have to test it out to see how it compares. But this has been my review of the Enyaq. Don't forget to like, share, and of course, subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any more questions, please drop them in the comment section below.